why you should probably buy an external camera monitor. Your camera has no screen at all. If it does, it's too small, or perhaps in an awkward place. Many are fixed, so you can't always see them. Tilting, flip out, and screens which do both are better. And some are better than others, that's for sure. The ones which can be moved into different positions are the best type, but they can still have limitations. But most are rarely big enough or bright enough. Monitors, as in proper monitors like this Portkeys BM5 WR, do not have these issues. You can get monitor arms of all different lengths to help you get into the ideal position for your shooting. But just how big should your monitor be? Do you want it to be in proportion to your camera, or is bigger better? Because you have tired, old eyes like me. Personally, I tend to use both 5 and 7-inch screens depending on what I'm shooting and the size of the camera. One big disadvantage of a bigger screen is you can end up with people watching what you are filming. An alternative to a monitor is an EVF, and that's great for privacy, handheld, bright daylight, and feeling much more connected to what you're filming. It is, after all, what I used for the first 17 years of my career, but I will talk about those in a separate video. This is the 5-inch Portkeys BM5 WR. Features-wise, it ticks just about every box for me that a proper external monitor needs to have. The thing that sets this monitor apart from every other monitor I've used is its ability to have not just wired camera control for dozens of cameras, but wireless control for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, 6K, and the Red Komodo. This absolutely transforms the operation of them both. Which functions you can control with each camera using the monitor is dependent on what the camera manufacturers let you, although Portkeys are constantly trying to figure out how to bypass those limitations to let you control more things. There is also wired control for a lot of mirrorless cameras when you connect them via a wire or USB cable. You will need to get the specific one for your cameras, as they aren't all the same. The mirrorless cameras generally have the least amount of parameters that you can control. Mostly things like record, stop and start, exposure controls, white balance, and different forms of focus adjustment. Not all of them, but most of them. It all depends on the camera you're using. I've heard the Panasonic GH6 works really well, but unfortunately I don't have one to show you.
Yeah, that's a shame, isn't it? I don't have one either. Actually, that's a blatant lie. I've got one right here. It's a GH6 connected with the Portkeys. It can control the aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, and you can hit record. All the useful stuff. Works really well with the GH6, doesn't it, Philip? Oh yeah, I forgot you don't have one.
No. But I do have this. Do you?
You always get the best cameras. Never did get to find out if Barbie's got a full-size HDMI port.
This is the camera.
This is the camera. Fully functional.
Oh, there it goes. There's a really high-res screen.
Video girl.
Wow.
It's easily the most ridiculous thing I've done, but also one of the most creative. If you haven't seen it, you really should. Link up in the top right-hand corner or in the description below. Whilst making this video, Portkeys added wireless control for most Sony Alpha cameras, which is so much better than using a USB cable. The least amount of cables plugged into your camera, the better, and it works really well. It's really easy to get connected, and is a really nice way of controlling your camera's key functions. You won't be able to open up the main or function menu, and of course there are limited options, but it's still very useful. One of the nicest things is when you change your aperture, it's smooth. This is something you cannot get if controlling it from the camera, or if your lens doesn't have a smooth iris ring. There's also the ability to control the camera's autofocus, although you're probably better off using the LCD screen, as the monitor cannot show you the focus boxes that the built-in LCD and EVF can, and doesn't have the full amount of control. If you are lucky enough to have one of the wonderful Sony FX6 cameras, then you have some nice control of it using the LANC cable, which plugs into the rear. You're able to access some pretty important features. Initially, you will see record, iris, zoom, manual focus, and the multi-function dial. When you press what looks like the play button, then a whole sub-menu opens up, which gives you access to most of the important operational parameters. And it also brings up the quick menu, but you can only navigate through that using the navigation buttons on the monitor. It's not touchscreen operation like it is on the built-in LCD screen. Sadly, there is no ability to operate the autofocus with the touchscreen. Hopefully Portkeys will figure this out soon. Portkeys are really good at adding features, so it's always worth checking for new firmware. The most comprehensive camera control functionality is with the Zcam cameras, or Cam depending on where you're from, using the LAN cable. You can literally control everything from the monitor, and is a much less fiddly way than using the buttons on top of the camera. Plus, you can also use the touchscreen on a monitor for single point touch focus, which can be useful, and bring up the full menu, which means, yes, you have the ability to completely control your camera. This brings me onto the wireless control of the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, 6K, 6K Pro, and Red Komodo. None of these cameras are able to bring up the camera menus on an external screen. You know, like most cameras you can buy, which is frankly bizarre. So having proper camera control of these with the BM5 WR is a lifesaver. I like touchscreens on my cameras as they can be very useful, but there must also be physical buttons, but you do need to hopefully be able to see them and access them at all times. And that can be a bit of a problem with the Blackmagics and the Red Komodo. The Blackmagic Pocket 4Ks and 6Ks have one of the best touchscreen user interfaces I have ever seen on a camera. It's second only to the DJI Ronin 4D. It's incredibly intuitive to change your settings and also to navigate the camera menu. You aren't entirely reliant on the touchscreen to operate the camera though. There are some very useful buttons on the top for adjusting your ISO, shutter, iris, and white balance in combination with the front dial. But the only way to access the other functions are by using the touchscreen. This is where we come into some issues. The 4K and 6K screens do not move. Whilst the 6K Pro one tilts, it's still not enough. You really need to be directly behind the camera to see and use it easily. But there is another problem that you may well run into, and that's due to the powering issues of the camera. You really need to use an external battery for them, and the most obvious and balanced place to put the battery causes obvious problems for using the LCD screen. The BM5 WR solves these issues. You simply pair them together via Bluetooth, and now you can operate the camera really easily from just the monitor. There's also no need to reach for the fiddly buttons on the camera. Whilst you don't have access to the more in-depth camera menu functions, the most important ones are all there, including setting your recording resolutions, frame rates, the compression rate of your chosen codec, and manual focus, although there is no touch to focus yet. I would love to have the ability to change audio levels, but currently you can't have that with any of the cameras that I've tried, apart from the ones that let you view and access the camera menus. Hopefully this is something that can be added by Portkeys. The Red Komodo is a great camera, but suffers from design over practicality. The Komodo's touchscreen isn't particularly responsive, and it's on top of the camera, with no ability to tilt it at all. It's sleek, but impractical. There are some physical buttons which you can use to navigate the menus, so you don't have to use a touchscreen, as well as changing some shooting parameters, but these buttons do not have fixed functions like ISO, iris, and shutter. They are for cycling through, and then you have to press select and you can only see what you're cycling through via the top screen. Unlike the Blackmagics, if you bring up the camera menu, you cannot see them on an external monitor or EVF. The one saving grace for these cameras is their apps do let you change all the camera settings, but should you really have to use a phone to get past the problems with basic camera controls? The BM5 WR doesn't control the Komodo via Bluetooth but via Wi-Fi. Once you've done this, suddenly the camera becomes so much easier to use. What you have access to is very similar to the Blackmagics. You cannot change your codecs compression or time base, but you can change resolutions and your off-speed frame rates. You also do have touch focus, both single and continuous. Although to change which mode you're in, you have to go into the main Komodo menu. Looking at the monitor itself, it's very bright at 2200 nits, which is fantastic for those crazy sunny days we have in England. 365 days a year. I would really only use this full brightness when in bright sunshine, as it will affect the contrast a bit, but at least you can clearly see without needing a sun hood. When indoors especially, I recommend bringing that brightness down to at least half, as that's more than bright enough. In fact, I often have it at minimum of 1. Unlike some other monitors, there's no issues with fan noise. You do have the ability to change the fan speed, but I kept mine on low even when at full brightness. It can feel warm to the touch, but I've had no overheating issues. Battery life is very good. It uses Sony L batteries, but you can power it off of an external power source, or if your camera has a power out, like I have here via the DTAP cable it comes with. There's SDI pass-through and HDMI to SDI conversion, which you can add a lot to. The functionality of the monitor is really just superb. It truly does have everything I need. You can add the functions you want and make adjustments to their individual parameters. For example, it's great to have edge peaking as well as color peaking, and you can really fine tune it. Too often it's missing from monitors. And little things like image capture and image overlay for lining up shots to match others, these things make a difference. Overall, I'm very impressed with it. Portkeys has come a long way in a few years since I first used one of their monitors. It looks great, is really well made, it doesn't feel cheap at all, has a really nice image, and is stacked with features. But it's the camera control that makes it stand out though, especially the wireless options. I've always recommended people get a decent monitor for their cameras as it transforms how you shoot. But with the Komodo, Pocket 4K, 6K and Z-Cam, the BM5 WR is much more than just a monitor, it's essential.